Hey guys, welcome to your second Android tutorial. In this tutorial, we're just going to be going over activities in the Android system. An activity is an application component of the Android system. It provides basically a screen with something that the users can interact with. These can be things like dialing on the phone, taking a photo, or sending an email. An application consists of multiple activities that are loosely bound to one another. So when you are on your email screen, you have your individual emails and then your list of all your emails. So essentially it's like you have one activity that is the email itself, and then when you touch it to open up the email, when you click on it, it's basically launching an activity to make that email do something. Each activity can launch one another, so this means that when you click on that email, you can also reply to it, you can delete it, you can move it to different folders. So those are all activities or things you can do with that email once you've gotten into that application. And these activities are loosely bound to one another, so you can do multiple things to an email, like store it in a certain folder and then reply to it, or delete it when your application memory gets full. Each time a new activity starts, the previous one is stopped, but the system preserves that stopped activity in something called a stack, or the backstack, which we'll be going over in a few slides. We can create activities of ourselves. These are created in our code. So when we begin programming Android, we are going to work on programming in Java and XML. What this will allow us to do is we declare an activity in the Android manifest, which is the XML portion of Android. And then the Java code is a language that executes all these things. Basically, XML is used to inflate Java. Anyway, when we create this application, we use these languages to create it. And within that, all activities are subclasses of the superclass activity. So when we create one activity, we need to think of it in terms of a subclass of the activity class. Anyway, we also have another thing to consider with our activities is the activity life cycle. What that is let's say you launch an application like the text messaging app. Then you receive a call. The messaging application is placed on pause, meaning that the application isn't necessarily destroyed. The activity isn't necessarily destroyed. It is placed in the stack. Then, once your call is over with, you return to the text messaging app by hitting the back button. And then you return to the application by pulling that activity from the stack and pulling it to your user's main attention, the screen. Other aspects of the Android system for activities include user interface, so what that person is actually able to click. The user interface, or commonly referred to as UI, is provided by different views. A view is something like a button, or a view of a bunch of text that you can read, or something that you can submit text to, a text box, or radio buttons. Another thing to consider with our user interface is something called a fragment. A fragment is a behavior or a portion of the user interface in an activity. Fragments can be combined into a single activity to build a multi-pane UI. We use a certain fragment in multiple activities. Fragments have their own life cycle, meaning that they are completely independent of small functioning pieces in an activity. They were created to support more dynamic and flexible user interfaces on our changing device screen. Loaders provide asynchronous loading of data. We will deal with this in a later tutorial, but I just wanted to let you know that they kind of existed, so this is a really fast slide. However, I did want to make one last note before we finished off this tutorial. When I've spoken about the activity life cycle, I've been referring to the backstack and the task as well. Each activity should be designed around a specific kind of action the user can perform, and then use that to start other activities. How many times have you been using an application, like one of those funny picture apps, and then you want to share the funny picture that you've just seen? When you share that picture from one application to another, so you pull up the menu, you go to text messaging, you go to share it to your friend, and when you're actually, during that action, calling the SMS app that you're using. SMS stands for Small Messaging Service, if you don't know what that was. So, which is actually text messaging. So, to have the Funny Picture app launch the SMS app, you need to have certain permissions, which is those things that when you download an Android application, they're like, would you like to accept this certain permission? So applications that access your phone storage or your internet or your contacts will ask certain permissions. That's when you hit OK and you download it, because none of us really read all those. And so you just download the application. It's requesting permissions to access those certain resources. So that's just another security blockage on the Android system. Also, within the permissions and the activity lifecycle I've been speaking about, we also have a thing called a task. A task is a small collection of activities that users can interact with when performing a job. And we'll be going over this in a more in-depth tutorial later on. So, for the time being, we've finished our tutorial on Android activities. In our next tutorial, we'll be going over what Android services are and talking about some of the functionality we can have because of them. Alright guys, I'll see you then.